Antarctica, where it's snowy all year round. However, I mentioned this species is called the African penguin. We're here in African Hall here at the Academy. Where in the world do you think you can find this species, my friends? That's right. Africa. Thank you for being bold and answering. Yes, it's not a trick question. You can find this species along the southern tip, the southern coastlines of the continent of Africa. The countries of South Africa and Namibia is where this species is naturally found. Now, that part of Africa is actually about the same distance south of Earth's equator as Southern California is north of Earth's equator. So that area in Southern Africa has a very similar climate to Los Angeles, California, if any of y'all have been down there. So generally, this habitat, oh, we've got some squabbling penguins in there. Generally, this habitat is actually warmer than it is here in San Francisco throughout most of the year. It fluctuates. About the highest temperature it will be in the air is about the mid to high 70s. And then in the water, about 10 degrees cooler than that. But then they will range. We sort of change the temperature within here to give the penguins a sense of seasons, which helps them to stay biologically on the same schedule, helps them with their molting schedule, which is when they lose their feathers and regrow new feathers, and also with their mating schedule as well. So this is why we kind of change that temperature throughout the year. Now we can see Holly is feeding these penguins two types of fish. She mentioned we feed them herring, which is the larger sort of fatty fish. And then there's a smaller one called capelin, which is more protein packed. Now these types of fish are not actually the same species that they'd be hunting naturally out off the coast of southern Africa, because the types of fish that they'd be hunting for out there are ones that many of us maybe have heard before: sardines and anchovies. Maybe some of us are brave enough to put some of that stuff on our pizza. But the main reason we don't feed them that same type of fish, we feed them these two, which are nutritionally similar, is because we humans have been historically overfishing that population of anchovies and sardines off the coast of southern Africa, which is a big contributing factor to this species becoming an endangered species. So we make sure that the fish that we're feeding these penguins is sustainably and responsibly sourced, which is something that's really important to us here at the Academy of Sciences, and something that we can all start doing in our own lives by asking restaurants if they serve sustainable seafood. And also, if you're interested, I have these super cool Seafood Watch cards. There's also an app you can download for free on your smartphone if you have one. But our friends at the Monterey Bay Aquarium created these cards, and it's a really great way to figure out what types of seafood you can find at your local grocery store that we know are sustainably sourced and not negatively affecting those ocean habitats out there, which could negatively affect populations of animals just like the African penguin here. Now, Holly, in addition to making sure we feed them sustainable seafood, we also have these penguins on what's called a species survival plan. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that SSP is and what that means for the lives of these penguins here?
Yeah, so species survival plans are used for many different types of animals in zoos and aquariums around the country. And it's really our responsibility to make sure that we keep the populations that we care for as healthy as possible. And really the first step in doing that is to make sure that they're genetically diverse. So we want to make sure that close relatives aren't having offspring together, because you can wind up with a lot of health problems. So an SSP for a specific type of animal, like penguins in this case, different representatives from zoos and aquariums across the country that have African penguins will get together every few years. They'll work with geneticists to kind of assess what the population looks like, and then based on how each bird is related, they will recommend which pairs should breed. So that means that sometimes birds are coming here, and sometimes we're sending them off to other facilities.
Exactly right. So once they do lay that egg, they sit on them back in these little holes in the back of the habitat. These are their nest boxes. That's where they lay on their eggs, where they oftentimes will sleep at night. And we actually have two penguins in here who don't look the same as the rest of these penguins. Maybe some of us have noticed that. These two kind of silvery gray looking penguins. Holly, are they a different species, or what's going on with those two as they peck at the other ones in there?
They're being really rude to start with. They are juveniles, so they're about 10 months old. They hatched earlier this year, and everybody's being really rude this morning. They hatched earlier this year, and they will get their adult colors when they go through their first molt, and that will be when they're about 1.5 years old. Right now, they're kind of just being obnoxious teenagers.
Yeah, I like that you refer to them as teenagers. They seem like they're behaving a little bit like teens today.
Yeah, they're kind of just getting in everybody's business.
Would you say that there are lots of big personalities within this penguin colony?
Yeah, absolutely. They're all really different. Just like if you're a teacher and you have a classroom full of all kinds of different personalities, and the way that they interact with each other and the way they interact with you varies. So it's kind of a lot like a classroom in a way.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor. I like that. Now, Holly, these birds have adapted over time to be excellent swimmers instead of flyers like other birds that we know of. And Holly, can you mention some of the ways that their penguin bodies help them to be such excellent swimmers and hunters out there off the coast of southern Africa?
Yeah, so first of all, they have a really streamlined body so that they can move really quickly through the water. And then their wings are very much paddle-like. So birds that fly have really long wings, kind of relative to their body size. Penguins' wings are much shorter. So if penguins were going to try and fly, they'd really need a wingspan of probably about 6 feet almost. So they'd basically be an albatross. But instead, they have these really short paddle-like wings. And they're made out of a really hard, dense tissue. So they'll flap their wings underwater to help them move, and then they use their feet to help them steer.
Exactly. So these penguins, when they're hunting for those anchovies and sardines out there in their natural range out there in the ocean, they can get up to pretty fast speeds using those wings to propel themselves forward. They can swim up to 12 to 15 miles per hour. Now, that might not seem like that fast. We can drive in a car much faster than that, but let's think about how fast humans can swim. Let's say Michael Phelps, fastest human swimmer of all time. He can only swim maybe 5 miles per hour in tip-top Olympic shape. So these penguins are far faster than any human could ever hope to be. And that's because they have spent millions of years adapting to this lifestyle, finding that food out there in the ocean waters where they are. Now, they also need to be really quick because there are definitely predators out there in the ocean that might want to make a little meal out of these little penguins. So, Holly, what types of predators would this species have to worry about off the coast of southern Africa?
Yeah, they have to worry about things like large sharks and large marine mammals, so seals and sea lions, or even things like orcas. Yeah, most of their predators are really in the water, so they're really good at kind of getting in and getting out as fast as they can. That's one reason. Another reason why they have to be really good swimmers, to find their food and to escape from predators. But that's also kind of why they can get away with being so awkward on land, is that they really didn't ever have to adapt to anyone really chasing them on the rocks. So that's why there's all kinds of funny videos of penguins like falling down rocks or ice flows, depending on where they are. They do have to worry about things like seagulls or other birds maybe going after eggs or chicks. And then these days they have to worry about people's cats and dogs and cars as well.
Right. So yeah, as more human buildings and homes and things like that encroach on the areas that these penguins have historically called homes, they do need to start worrying about those additional predators like feral dogs and cats that Holly mentioned. Exactly. Now, I want to open it up to questions, but before we get there, Holly, the last thing I want to ask you about is the coloration of penguins' feathers, because most species of penguins that we know of are kind of famous for having that black and white feather coloration. They look like they're wearing little tuxedos going out to a nice cocktail dinner event or something like that. But, Holly, there's actually a really cool reason for that coloration, isn't there?
Yeah, they seem really obvious to us on land, but again, we were kind of just talking about where most of their predators are, which is underwater. So this is actually a form of camouflage that helps them blend in. And you might be able to think of other animals that have a similar kind of color pattern that live in the water, things like orcas or other types of whales or sharks. So the light belly actually blends in with sunlight coming from the top of the water, and then the dark back blends in with the ocean floor. So this is kind of a common theme you'll see in a lot of animals that live underwater.
Right, exactly. And this is, even though humans, when we see penguins, it's on the land where they don't look camouflaged at all, but it does work really well out there in the water where you might have to worry about predators not just in front of you, behind you, or to your sides, but above you and below you in the water column as well. And Holly gave a great example. The orca has that counter shading as well, the black back but the white belly. The great white shark is another example, the gray back with the light colored belly. And even if you go down into our aquarium, if you're looking at specifically reef fish, who are very, very colorful, they still tend to be darker colors on their backs but lighter colors on their bellies, because this is a very successful. We'll get them answered. Have you ever wondered anything about penguins? Or how Holly takes care of them? Yeah. Oh, that's an excellent question. Holly, is this a migratory species of penguin, or are they pretty sedentary in their areas?
That's a good question. African penguins are not really migratory. They pretty much stick to the little islands right off the coast of South Africa. They might travel for a few days if they really have to look for fish, but they pretty much stick to home. That's possibly one of the reasons why their kind of molting and egg-laying seasons are kind of diffuse, and they kind of last for several months, and they'll all go through them at different times. But one of their very close relatives, the Magellanic penguins, which live in South America, are migratory, and they go through kind of a very synced up molt. Everybody pretty much molts at the same time, lays at the same time, because if you kind of have to be out at sea following your food around, then that gets a little more challenging. So
yeah, that's an excellent example. Those Magellanic penguins, those South American penguins, are the ones that you'd see if you go to San Francisco Zoo. Those are the ones they have there.
They look really similar.
Yeah, look very, very similar, absolutely. I would not be able to tell them apart. Definitely not.
Yeah, the Magellanics have another kind of thicker black band across their chest, so it kind of looks like a busier African penguin.
I like that. Yeah, very cool. Thank you for that question. That was excellent. Any other questions for biologist Holly this morning? Yeah. Great question. Holly, what is the lifespan of an African penguin, and is there a difference in their lifespan for a place at the academy versus out in their natural range?
Yeah, in the wild it's about 10 to 15 years, but in places like the academy they can double or triple that. So our oldest bird is 34. She's in her nest box at the moment. She has a yellow band on her left wing, and we actually have 4 birds over the age of 25. She does have a little bit of arthritis, so she kind of tends to either stay in her box or get in the water, which is kind of off her feet. We give her a little anti-inflammatory for that, like you might take some ibuprofen, kind of similar to that, but she's doing pretty well.
Yeah. So then that is mainly because in a place like the academy, they don't have predators to worry about. It's a much less stressful environment. They get fed regularly. They don't have to worry about how they're going to find that food. And they get pretty good health care here with our veterinarian staff. So those are all factors that contribute to that longer lifespan. Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's a great question. Holly, as these penguins do become more geriatric, you mentioned that sometimes we have to put them on like arthritis medication, but do we have to vary their diet in any other ways?
Yeah, we might make adjustments depending on, for a lot of different reasons to their diet. So Dunker, for example, I'm trying to only give him capelin because he tends to be the biggest one and could probably do with a little bit of a diet. Tux, also, we kind of watch his diet a little bit because he will gain weight. He has a weird little toe thing. It's kind of like, I don't know, permanently dislocated. I don't know, the joint is just a little weird. So if he gains a lot of weight, then we'll see him start to limp. So we'll monitor that. Homie pretty much just solely eats capelin. She's kind of prone to eat a lot of she's prone to gain weight too. And then we've also seen in some of our older birds, including Dawson, is some kind of issues with vitamin A, and that can kind of depend on the type of fish that they're eating. So we'll go ahead and add supplements to that, like a fish oil supplement we actually add in. They all get a vitamin fish every day, so we supplement with things like a B1 vitamin, Missouri, which is designed for fish-eating birds, E, things like that. So they're also getting those supplements as well.
Very cool. Now, about how many fish per day could one of these penguins eat?
Yeah, it depends on the bird, and it depends on the type of fish they're eating. So it could be 1 herring to upwards of 20 or 30 capelin in a day. Again, we kind of will watch that, and if someone's really downing the capelin, we might hold back, or it might tell us that they're about to do something like molt or lay an egg.
Yeah. Now, that's sort of, it sounds like, 20 or 30 little capelin, that doesn't seem like that many. But when you think about the size of these birds, that's quite a lot of food. And they have really high metabolism, which they need in order to get up to the speeds that they need to get to in order to catch that prey in the first place. And so to kind of put it into perspective, a herring or 20 or 30 capelin a day would be like a human eating about 40 cheeseburgers a day. So it's a pretty intensive diet, for sure. So when we do put these penguins on a diet, there are good reasons for it.
Yeah.
That was an excellent question. Thank you. All right. Do we have any other questions for Holly? We've got time for maybe 1 or 2 more. Yeah, we'll go back to you. Yeah, that's another great question. Holly, when these penguins are out in the wild, are there family units but naturally matriarchal or patriarchal, or how does that tend to work within penguin communities?
Yeah, so the way science scientists describe the social structure for penguins is monogamous. And that just means that they tend to form strong male-female bonds, but there's not really, like, it's not really a matriarchy or a patriarchy in particular, and the work between those individuals is pretty equal. So the female obviously will lay an egg, but both the male and female will take turns incubating the egg. So Alex, for example, part of our green-banded couple, the female's right here, he's incubating an artificial egg right now. So these two will take turns sitting on that egg, and then they will both help take care of the chicks when they hatch. Their eggs are in an incubator right now because they're enthusiastic about the idea of parenting, but not so great in the execution, and they tend to break their eggs because they're overly zealous about incubating them and sitting on them. So for penguins, the work is actually pretty equal between males and females. Now, I said scientists describe it as monogamous, and that's kind of their social structure. Penguins are about as monogamous as people are, and scientists have seen, scientists will define between genetically monogamous and socially monogamous. So they've actually done studies where they've taken like feather clippings of chicks, and they don't always match up to everybody who is sitting on them. But kind of very generally speaking, the more a pair for birds that's where both kind of really have to take care of the chick, they tend to be more genetically monogamous than in other species where the work maybe isn't quite as equal. So that kind of seems to have an impact on philandering, shall we say.
That's very interesting. I did not know that, Holly. Thank you for talking about that. That was an excellent question. Right on. All right. Are there any other last-minute questions? Going once? Going twice. Going thrice. All right, well, my friends, that brings us to the end of the time we have for our Penguin Feed this morning. Can we give both Holly and Piper a big round of applause? Thank you both so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you all for coming. They were fantastic questions. Happy Halloween, and thanks for supporting the Academy.
Happy Halloween to you, too. Thanks again,
guys.
Holly. All right, and thank you all so much for joining us. We can't do any of the cool stuff we do here without your help and support, so thank you all for being here today and supporting the Academy of Sciences. I hope you all had a good time, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day here. Thanks, y'all.